What kind of world punishes a girl for doing what no one else dared? The morning air was bitter, clinging to the cracked walls and worn window panes of a tiny third-floor apartment in Hollow Creek, a part of the city most people pretended didn't exist. The sun hadn't fully risen, but 17-year-old Maya Thompson was already wide awake, lying stiff beneath a blanket too thin to keep out the creeping cold. The ticking of the old alarm clock echoed like a countdown to survival, not another school day. Maya's eyes were fixed on a sheet of paper taped to the wall across from her bed. The words "Final Notice" bled red through cheap ink, glaring like a warning she couldn't outrun. Her mother's tired handwriting scribbled next to it read, 3 days. That's all they had before the apartment, this fragile shelter of memory, warmth, and resilience, would be taken from them. She didn't cry. Not anymore. She swung her legs over the edge of the mattress, the floor cold beneath her bare feet. The apartment smelled like old wood, mildew, and desperation. In the tiny kitchenette, she reached for the only thing resembling breakfast, a piece of stale toast from the night before. It crumbled as she bit into it, the flavorless crunch grounding her back to reality. Her mother, Carla Thompson, had already left hours ago to work another exhausting shift at the Bayview Diner. 42 years old and barely sleeping, Carla carried trays heavier than her hope, pasting smiles onto her face while her soles blistered inside shoes older than Maya's textbooks. Maya quietly pulled on a wrinkled shirt, the cleanest she had. She adjusted her oversized backpack, its seams splitting under the weight of borrowed school books. As she passed the kitchen table, she paused, her eyes lingering on the eviction notice. A breath caught in her chest, not fear, not anger, something colder, something heavier. Powerlessness. Outside, Hollow Creek whispered stories through every peeling window frame and rusted fire escape. Dogs barked behind sagging fences. A man in a hoodie sat hunched on a milk crate, mumbling to himself while smoking the last of something cheap. Maya kept walking, fast, steady. She'd learned the rhythm of invisibility long ago. Don't move too slow, don't move too fast, and never look too hopeful. But as she reached the edge of downtown, the world flipped, literally. Glass buildings reached skyward, like promises she was never meant to touch. The street changed. Trash disappeared. Sidewalks widened. The scent of car exhaust was replaced with cologne and roasted espresso, and people, so many people, streamed by in tailored suits, high heels clicking, phones pressed to ears, eyes locked on destinations far above ground level. Maya kept her head down as she passed the towering Renshaw Enterprises Tower, a sleek marvel of glass and money. Her skin crawled with awareness. Here, she was no longer invisible. Here, she was out of place. She didn't belong, and the world made sure she knew it. And then she saw her. Near the front steps of the tower, a woman in her early 30s, white, visibly pregnant, stood gripping the metal railing with trembling hands. Her face was pale, her breathing shallow, her knees wobbling like paper. Maya slowed, instinct jolting her out of her rhythm. She glanced at the crowd. Businessmen, security guards, passers-by. So many eyes, and not a single one looking with concern. Some noticed, yes, but chose not to act, just like always. A voice rang in Maya's mind, her mother's voice. Stay out of trouble, baby. Girls like us don't get a second chance, especially in places like that. But then the woman's knees gave out, and Maya ran. What happened next is not just a story. It's a collision of lives from two different worlds. One act of kindness, one unconscious bias, one man with too much power, and one girl with nothing but heart. This is not just about race or wealth or courage. This is about what we choose to see and who we choose to ignore. So sit down, take a breath, grab a glass of water, find a comfortable seat, as you're about to hear the full story. And once you do, you'll never look at silence the same way again. 3 days. That number had settled into Maya Thompson's mind like a stone dropped into deep water, sinking, pulling everything down with it. The memory of the eviction notice haunted her, even as she walked through the city. It had stared back at her from the cracked laminate table that morning, the words "final notice" outlined in cold red ink like blood on a clean white sheet. 3 days to pack a life into boxes. 3 days to erase themselves from a place they had poured every ounce of resilience into. 3 days to find a miracle, or vanish quietly into another forgotten corner of Riverside. Maya didn't believe in miracles, not anymore. By the time her scuffed sneakers reached the edge of Hollow Creek, the sun had broken through the clouds, but the warmth didn't reach her skin. This part of the city still lived in shadows, in rust, in chipped brick and sagging rooftops. Her shoulders hunched slightly, not from the weight of her bag, but from the invisible burden pressing against her chest. Fear, shame, exhaustion. She passed the corner where Mr. Watkins, the retired postman, always sat on his stoop, sipping from a chipped mug and nodding to the kids who walked by. Today he wasn't there. Maybe the cold kept him in, or maybe he'd finally given up nodding to a world that didn't nod back. The streets she walked were cracked with more than time. They bore the weight of broken dreams. The for rent signs hung like false promises. Grocery stores with metal shutters and corner shops that sold more cigarettes than bread. She walked past a laundromat that hadn't had hot water in weeks. Past the church with the boarded-up windows and the faded sign that still read, "All are welcome," though nobody seemed to feel that way anymore. Maya didn't stop. She couldn't afford to. Every second she spent in Hollow Creek was a reminder of where she came from, and how tightly the world wanted to keep her there. But as she crossed into downtown, the contrast was so sharp it hurt her eyes. It was like walking from grayscale into full color. Downtown, Riverside was a symphony of wealth. Gleaming high-rises reflected the golden morning sun. Cars purred instead of coughed. Coffee shops spilled with professionals, tapping away on laptops and sipping drinks with names she couldn't pronounce. Every corner smelled like luxury. Roasted beans, polished leather, fresh-cut flowers that probably cost more than a week's groceries. Here, no one walked with their heads down. They moved like they belonged. Maya adjusted the strap of her backpack, tugging it tighter. The weight of her library books shifted across her back. Books borrowed from the one safe place she still had, the public library, where nobody asked where she came from or what she could afford. As she walked, she glanced at her reflection in the mirrored windows. Her clothes didn't fit quite right. Her jeans were clean but old, her shoes too worn, her face too tired. She tried to walk with confidence, like she wasn't out of place, like she wasn't calculating the distance between herself and the security guards posted near the towering entrances of buildings like the Renshaw Enterprises Tower. Like she hadn't been told since she was 5 years old that people like her should stay quiet, stay small, stay out of sight. She hated that she had learned how to shrink herself. She reached the crosswalk in front of the Renshaw building, pressing the button and waiting for the light to change. Her eyes drifted to the entrance. Sleek glass doors, polished tile, security in dark uniforms, scanning faces like gatekeepers to another universe. She wasn't here for them. She wasn't even supposed to be noticed. Then she saw the woman. She stood near the railing, maybe 10 feet from the door, white, early 30s, visibly pregnant, hands gripping the cold metal as if it were the only thing keeping her upright. Her face was flushed, her eyes distant. Her breath came in short, panicked bursts. Sweat glistened across her brow despite the morning chill. Older sitting Maya froze. Something was wrong. She looked around. Dozens of people were passing. Some glanced, some even paused for a second. But no one moved. No one stepped closer. No one helped. They were too busy, too comfortable, too afraid, or worse, too indifferent. A flicker of hesitation gripped Maya. Her mother's voice echoed in her head. "Stay out of trouble, baby. They'll always see the worst in you first." But the woman swayed again. Her knees buckled slightly. And Maya moved. Her feet hit the ground like instinct. She barely registered the movement, just the certainty in her chest that she wouldn't walk away. The woman collapsed into her arms, heavier than expected, trembling, breath hot and shallow. Maya tightened her grip, speaking low and steady. "It's okay," she murmured. "I've got you. You're not alone." But they were alone. Despite the crowd, despite the city humming around them, it was just the two of them, a struggling stranger and a girl who had nothing but a backpack and a heart too big to ignore suffering. She glanced around again. No one came. No one offered help. Just stares. Some curious, some judgmental, some already turning away. Maya's jaw tightened. She reached into her bag and found the water bottle she'd packed that morning, cracked open the cap with her teeth, and offered it to the woman. She helped her sip. Then, gently, she offered a granola bar she'd saved for later. The woman barely chewed, just swallowed, her lips dry, her voice a whisper. "Something's wrong." Maya's pulse jumped. This wasn't just fatigue. This was real, dangerous, urgent. The woman cried out, sharp, high-pitched, gut-wrenching. Maya shifted her weight to hold her better. "Somebody call 911, she shouted toward the crowd. "She's having contractions. She needs a hospital now." More stares, murmurs, but still no one moved. Then, finally, a woman in heels and a power suit pulled out her phone and spoke into it. Her voice too calm, too slow. Maya turned back, panic rising. The woman whimpered, her nails digging into Maya's arm. "My baby." Maya had no phone, no car, no way to carry this woman to safety, just willpower and a voice that refused to be ignored. "Help us," she yelled again. "Don't just stand there." A man in a security uniform began walking toward her. Tall, rigid, eyes cold. Maya braced herself. She had seen that look before. On bus drivers, store clerks, teachers. The look that asked not what's happening, but what did she do? "Step away from her," the guard barked. Maya didn't flinch. "I'm helping her," she said, loud but calm. "She's going into labor." I said, "Step back." "Are you serious? She's about to pass out." The guard's hand hovered over his radio. The air thickened. People watched, but nobody helped. Maya stood her ground, the woman's full weight still leaning on her. And then, a voice cut through the tension. "Let her go." Firm, measured, commanding. The crowd parted slightly, and a man stepped forward. Tall, well-dressed, eyes sharp like broken glass. The kind of man whose face appeared on magazines, in news reports. Ethan Renshaw. Maya's heart skipped. He saw everything, her, the woman, the guard's posture, and with just 4 words, everything shifted. The guard stepped back. Maya held tighter. And as Sophia Renshaw, Ethan's wife, groaned in pain and collapsed further into Maya's arms, the billionaire stepped forward, not as a CEO, but as a husband about to lose everything. The card weighed in Maya's palm like a living thing, pulsing with possibilities she had never dared to imagine. She stood motionless on the sidewalk, the bustling noises of Riverside's downtown blurring into a dull roar around her. Her fingers curled tightly around the small black rectangle. its edges pressing into her skin, grounding her to the moment. The afternoon light slanted across the city in long golden shafts, but to Maya, the world had narrowed into two things: the heavy card in her hand and the even heavier knot tightening in her chest. She slipped the card into the back pocket of her jeans and began to walk, one step at a time, each footfall loud in her mind. Her body moved through the crowd, but her thoughts stayed locked in the space she had just left. The cracked sidewalk, the flashing sirens, the sharp bark of the security guard's command, and Ethan Renshaw's voice cutting through it all like a blade. "Let her go." The words echoed inside her, a strange mix of command and salvation. When she reached Hollow Creek again, the city seemed to close around her, familiar and suffocating. The streets were narrower here, the buildings lower, as if even architecture understood its residents were meant to stay small. The salty smell of the nearby bay clashed with the metallic tang of rusted metal and wet concrete. Laundry hung from sagging balconies, fluttering like faded flags of defeat. She climbed the narrow, rickety staircase to their apartment 2 steps at a time, the old wood groaning under her weight. She hesitated at the door, resting her forehead against the cool metal for a moment, gathering herself. The card burned like a secret against her skin. Inside, the apartment was dim, the only light coming from the small window over the sink. Maya's mother, Carla Thompson, stood at the stove, stirring a pot of soup so thin it barely qualified as a meal. Her shoulders sagged with exhaustion, and her hair, once thick and lively, was now pulled into a tired bun. The familiar clatter of the old spoon against the pot filled the silence between them. Maya's chest tightened painfully. She didn't know how to explain what had just happened, what it might mean. "Hey, baby," Carla said without turning around, her voice soft but brittle at the edges. "You're home late." Maya swallowed. Her mouth was dry, her throat felt raw, scraped by everything she wanted to say but didn't know how. Instead of answering, she reached into her pocket and pulled out the card. Her fingers trembled slightly as she placed it on the table between them, the polished black surface catching what little light the room offered. Carla turned at the sound, her eyes narrowing in confusion. She wiped her hands on a faded dish rag and walked over, picking up the card with calloused fingers. She squinted at the name embossed in elegant gold, Ethan Renshaw. For a long moment she didn't speak. The only sound was the faint bubbling of the pot on the stove. Then she looked up, her eyes searching Maya's face, reading the fear, the hope, the confusion written there. "Maya," she said slowly, her voice a low tremble, "why do you have this?" And the story came pouring out of her. Every detail, from the moment she saw Sophia stumble outside the tower, to the crushing indifference of the crowd, to the security guard's suspicion, to Ethan Renshaw stepping between her and a system that had been ready to erase her without a second thought. She spoke in a rush, words tumbling over each other, as if by telling the story fast enough she could make it more believable, more real. When she finished, silence fell heavy over the room. Carla sat down heavily in one of the mismatched kitchen chairs, the card still clutched in her hand. Her face was unreadable, a mask stretched tight over something raw and trembling underneath. Maya stood there, twisting the strap of her backpack around her fingers, waiting. Finally, Carla set the card down, carefully, as if it might explode. "This," she began, then stopped, biting her lip hard enough to leave a mark. "This sounds too good to be true." "I know," Maya whispered. Her mother's hands clenched into fists on the table, the knuckles whitening. Maya watched, feeling like a child again, helpless in the face of adult fears she didn't know how to fight. After a long minute, Carla reached out and took Maya's hand, squeezing it tightly. "We go together," she said simply. Maya nodded, a lump rising in her throat so fast she couldn't speak around it. Carla's voice softened, threading through the stillness like a lifeline. Whatever this is, you're not walking into it alone. Maya nodded again, blinking back the sting in her eyes. Outside, a car backfired, startling a chorus of barking dogs into life. The city kept moving. Inside their tiny kitchen, a decision had been made that would change everything. That night, sleep was impossible. Maya lay on her back, staring at the ceiling, tracing the cracks that spiderwebbed across the paint like secret roads. She turned the card over and over between her fingers, the smoothness of it strange against her rough skin. She thought about the woman she had helped, Sophia, whose life she had stumbled into and changed without meaning to. She thought about Ethan Renshaw, about the weight of his gaze, about the quiet command in his voice. She thought about what tomorrow might bring. Every possibility, every fear, every wild hope tangled together in her chest until she couldn't breathe. Finally, she swung her legs off the bed and padded barefoot to the tiny window. She pressed her forehead against the glass, looking out over Hollow Creek, where the lights flickered and the night smelled like rust and old dreams. Somewhere beyond the crumbling rooftops and broken streets, the gleaming towers of downtown pierced the darkness like false stars. Tomorrow, she would walk into that world. Tomorrow everything could change. Morning came too soon. The thin light bled into the apartment, turning the walls a sickly gray. Maya sat at the table, a cup of coffee cooling in her hands, watching her mother iron the only decent blouse she owned. Neither of them spoke much. The weight of the day pressed down on them, thick and heavy. When it was time to leave, Carla tucked the card into her purse as if it were a fragile talisman. She straightened Maya's collar, smoothing the fabric with hands that shook slightly. "You ready?" she asked, her voice rough. "No," Maya admitted. "But I'm going anyway." Carla smiled, a small, fierce thing, and nodded. "Good," she said. "That's my girl." They stepped out into the morning together, the door clicking shut behind them with a sound that felt far too final. The walk to downtown felt longer than usual. Every step brought them closer to something unknown, something terrifying, something miraculous. When they reached the Renshaw Enterprises tower, Maya's breath caught in her throat. It looked even bigger in the daylight, more untouchable, more impossible. She hesitated at the foot of the wide marble steps, staring up at the gleaming facade. Her mother placed a hand on her back, steady and warm. "Let's go," Carla said softly. Together they climbed the steps. The receptionist barely glanced at them until Carla pulled out the card. Then everything changed. Smiles appeared. Doors opened. They were directed to the top floor. The elevator ride was silent. Maya could hear her own heartbeat echoing in her ears. When the doors slid open, Ethan Renshaw was already waiting. He stood by the massive glass windows, sunlight cutting sharp angles across his tailored suit. He turned when he saw them, and for a moment, Maya thought she saw something strange flicker across his face. Relief, maybe? Or hope? "Mrs. Thompson?" "Maya," he greeted them, his voice low but steady. "Thank you for coming." Maya's hands clenched into fists at her sides. She nodded once, unable to trust her voice. Ethan gestured to the seating area near his desk, plush leather chairs and a polished table that seemed absurdly out of place in her world. They said, "He didn't waste time." "I won't pretend to know what you've been through," Ethan said, leaning forward, his hands folded carefully. "But what you did yesterday, it mattered." Maya swallowed hard. He looked at Carla. "I'd like to offer you a job here," he said simply. "Full-time, good pay, benefits, stability." Carla's breath hitched. She covered her mouth with one hand, her eyes wide. "And for you," he added, turning to Maya. A scholarship. Full tuition to Riverside Academy. The words hit Maya like a blow. Riverside Academy. The school she had dreamed of but never dared to hope for. A place that opened doors not even visible from Hollow Creek. Tears pricked at the corners of her eyes, but she blinked them back fiercely. "What's the catch?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Ethan smiled, a small, tired smile. "No catch," he said. "Just one condition." He leaned closer, his gaze steady. "Don't waste it." Maya nodded, her throat too tight for words. Carla reached across the table and took Maya's hand in hers, squeezing tightly. In that moment, everything changed. Not because a rich man gave them a chance, but because Maya had chosen, even when the world told her to walk away, to run toward someone who needed her. And now, someone was running toward her too. For the first time in her life, Maya didn't feel invisible. She felt seen. And it was only the beginning. The hum of the city throbbed below the massive windows, a distant, pulsing heartbeat that Maya barely registered. She sat stiffly on the edge of the leather chair in Ethan Renshaw's office, the scholarship folder heavy in her lap, the offer heavier still in her mind. She kept one hand pressed against the folder's cover as if afraid it might vanish if she let go. Across the glossy table, Carla Thompson was crying quietly into a crumpled napkin, her shoulders shaking with each silent sob. Her mother, who had weathered every storm life threw at them, was undone by two simple words: "You're hired." Ethan Renshaw leaned back slightly in his chair, his posture still controlled, still composed, but his eyes were softer now, the sharp edges dulled. He wasn't a titan of industry in that moment. He was simply a man who had seen something precious nearly slip away and had chosen, finally, to see the people who had saved it. Maya felt like she was floating just above the moment, detached, weightless. This wasn't real. It couldn't be. She shifted in her seat, the leather squeaking under her. Her fingers brushed the edge of the folder again, grounding her. "Maya," Ethan said quietly. She blinked and looked up, startled. "I know this is a lot," he continued, "and I know trust isn't easy when the world teaches you otherwise." His voice didn't lecture, it didn't command, it offered. Maya tightened her grip on the folder. Behind her, the city stretched out in every direction, gleaming and sprawling and brutal. Somewhere down there was Hollow Creek, still crumbling, still forgotten. The eviction notice was probably still pinned to the kitchen wall, a red slash against a backdrop of worn wallpaper. Some part of her wanted to run back to it, to run back to something she understood, even if it was killing her slowly. But a louder part, newer, fiercer, wanted to stay, wanted to fight for this sliver of a chance. Ethan stood, smoothing down the front of his jacket. The movement was so polished, so effortless, that it seemed like it belonged to another species entirely. He walked to the window, staring out at the city as if he could will it into a better shape. "When I was a boy," he said without turning around, "my father told me the world belonged to those who took it." Maya stayed silent, her hands clenching tighter. Ethan's voice dropped lower. "Bill was wrong," he said. "The world doesn't belong to the takers. It belongs to the ones who refuse to let it break them." He turned back to face her, and for the first time, Maya saw something raw and aching in his eyes. "You didn't take anything yesterday, Maya," he said. "You gave." The words hit her harder than she expected. She swallowed past the lump in her throat and nodded once, sharply, before she could second-guess herself. "I'll do it," she said, her voice shaking. Carla looked up, her tear-streaked face breaking into something that wasn't quite a smile, but was too full of pride to be anything else. Ethan exhaled slowly, as if releasing something he'd been holding for too long. "Good," he said simply. A secretary entered the room quietly then, carrying a stack of papers. She handed them to Ethan, who flipped through them briefly before setting 2 folders in front of Maya and Carla. "Contracts," he said. "Standard paperwork. You'll also find the enrollment documents for Riverside Academy. We'll cover tuition, books, uniforms, everything." Maya stared at the folders. It was real. "Who's happening?" "Take them home," Ethan said, his voice gentler now. "Think about it. You don't have to decide today." But Maya knew she already had. She had decided the moment she caught Sophia Renshaw before she could hit the pavement. The moment she chose to see a human being instead of an inconvenience. The moment she chose hope over fear. They stepped back onto the streets of Riverside an hour later, clutching the folders to their chests like lifelines. The sunlight was sharper now, the air brisk with the hint of fall. Maya turned her face into the wind, letting it sting her cheeks, clear her head. Her mother reached for her hand, and Maya didn't pull away. They walked in silence for a long time, weaving through the crowded sidewalks, past coffee shops and boutiques and hurried professionals. At one point, Maya glanced into a bakery window and saw her reflection. She almost didn't recognize herself. The girl in the glass looked taller somehow, stronger, not because of the clothes she wore or the folders she carried, but because of the decision she had made to believe. They reached the bus stop at the edge of downtown, where the glass skyscrapers gave way to cracked sidewalks and dented cars. The Hollow Creek bus rattled into view, belching smoke, its paint peeling. Maya climbed aboard, her mother following close behind. They found a pair of seats near the back, the cracked vinyl sticking slightly to their clothes. As the bus jerked into motion, Maya pressed her forehead against the cool glass of the window and watched as the towers of Riverside slid away behind her. She knew, deep in her bones, that she would return someday. But next time, she would walk through those glass doors as someone who belonged. Not because someone had handed her a place, but because she had earned it. At home, they spread the folders across the kitchen table, the documents a mosaic of possibility. Carla read each page carefully, her lips moving silently. Maya skimmed through hers faster, her heart thudding in her ears. One page caught her eye, the Riverside Academy Handbook. She traced the school's crest with her fingertip, a shield encircled by the words Virtus, Sapientia, Speed, Courage, Wisdom, Hope. It stared back at her like a dare. Maya sat back in her chair, the kitchen spinning slightly around her. She thought of the eviction notice still taped to the wall. She thought of her mother's calloused hands, worn from years of invisible labor. She thought of Hollow Creek, its rusted fences, its cracked sidewalks, its tired dreams. And she thought of herself, not as the girl who belonged in the shadows, but as the girl who had reached out a hand when no one else had. The girl who was about to reach again. That night, as they ate a dinner of canned soup and stale bread, Carla raised her mug of instant coffee in a small, solemn toast. "What miracles we make ourselves," she said. Maya clinked her mug against her mother's, a fierce light burning in her chest. "To never giving up," she said. The mugs clinked, the sound small but defiant. Outside, Hollow Creek slept, the wind carrying whispers through the broken alleys and sagging rooftops. But inside their tiny apartment, something new bloomed, something wilder, tougher, brighter than any fear. A beginning. Dramas. A future. The morning sun spilled weakly through the grimy window of the apartment, dust motes dancing lazily in the pale light. Maya Thompson sat at the small kitchen table, her hands trembling slightly as she tied the laces of her scuffed sneakers. The backpack beside her was worn thin at the seams, sagging under the weight of borrowed books, second-hand notebooks, and the tattered edges of a future she could now dare to imagine. Across the room, Carla Thompson was fussing over a simple breakfast, burnt toast and instant coffee, acting like it was just another ordinary day. But it wasn't. They both knew it. Today was the day Maya would step into a new world. A world that wasn't built for her. A world that might not want her there. Maya's heart pounded against her ribs with a painful rhythm. Doubts gnawed at the edges of her resolve. She wasn't from Riverside Academy. She was from Hollow Creek, the forgotten part of the city, the part with peeling paint, broken sidewalks, and lives spent stitching scraps of hope together. "You ready, baby?" Carla asked gently, placing a cracked mug of coffee in front of her. Maya nodded, though she didn't feel ready, not even close. She picked up the Riverside Academy handbook again, flipping it open to the first page. The school's motto stared back at her. Courage, wisdom, hope. It felt like a challenge. It felt like a promise. "Ready as I'll ever be," Maya whispered. Carla crouched down in front of her daughter and placed both hands on Maya's knees. Her touch was firm, grounding. "Listen to me," she said, her voice low and thick with emotion. "You walk in there like you belong, because you do. You earned this, Maya, not because someone handed it to you, because you reached for it when no one else would." Maya blinked rapidly, the sting of unshed tears burning her eyes. "I'll remember," she said hoarsely. Carla squeezed her knees once more, then stood, brushing invisible lint from Maya's shoulders. "Now," Carla said, attempting a smile. "Go. Show them who you are." Maya stood, adjusting the straps of her backpack. The folder containing her acceptance letter was tucked safely inside, pressed flat against the battered fabric, as if by sheer willpower it would shield her. As they stepped out into the hallway, the air was crisp and biting. The streets smelled faintly of damp concrete and something frying in old grease down the block. Every step toward the bus stop felt heavier than the last. As the rickety Hollow Creek bus wheezed around the corner, Maya felt her stomach knot tighter. She turned to her mother one last time. "Vaughn," she said, her voice cracking, "what if I can't do this?" Carla pulled her into a fierce hug. "Then you do it anyway," she whispered into Maya's hair. "You get up every day and you do it scared if you have to. You do it because you can." Maya clung to her mother for a heartbeat longer, then pulled away, steeling herself. The bus doors creaked open with a groan. Maya climbed aboard, feeling 100 invisible eyes watching her, weighing her, measuring her. She found an empty seat near the back, tucking herself into the corner. As the bus rattled toward downtown, she pressed her forehead to the cold window, watching Hollow Creek fall away behind her. The broken fences, the sagging roofs, the lives carved from scarcity. And then the city changed. The streets widened, the buildings gleamed. People in sharp suits and polished shoes walked briskly along sidewalks lined with coffee shops and boutiques. The divide was stark, it always was, and Maya was crossing it. When the bus lurched to a stop in front of Riverside Academy, she almost didn't move. The school rose like a fortress of privilege, red brick, sprawling lawns, polished marble steps leading to double oak doors. Students in crisp uniforms streamed through the entrance, laughing, shouting, alive with a careless confidence Maya could only admire from afar. Her hand tightened around the strap of her backpack. "You belong," her mother's voice echoed in her mind. Maya forced herself to stand, forced herself to step off the bus, forced herself to walk up those gleaming marble steps, even as every instinct screamed at her to turn around and run. Inside, the halls were flooded with light. Locker doors clanged open and shut. Teachers' voices floated down the corridors. Laughter echoed off the high ceilings, and everywhere Maya looked, she saw the same thing. Shiny shoes, designer backpacks, faces scrubbed clean with expensive soap, She felt their eyes the moment she entered. A ripple of curiosity, a few raised eyebrows, a few whispered words. She ducked her head slightly, fighting the urge to shrink into herself. "Maya Thompson," a voice called out sharply. She turned to see a woman in a sleek navy blazer holding a clipboard. "Yes," Maya said, her voice barely carrying over the noise. The woman's smile was thin but not unkind. "I'm Miss Warren, Dean of Admissions. Welcome to Riverside Academy." Maya managed a nod. "Come with me," Miss Warren said briskly. "We'll get you settled." As she followed Ms. Warren down the polished corridor, Maya caught glimpses of the students she was about to call classmates. Boy tossing a football back and forth in the hallway. A group of girls clustered around a mirror, applying lip gloss. A knot of kids laughing uproariously at something on a phone screen. None of them looked like her. None of them noticed her. Or maybe they noticed too much. Miss Warren led her to a small office near the administrative wing. There, a neatly pressed uniform waited on a hanger. Navy blazer, white button-down, plaid skirt. "Get changed," Ms. Warren instructed. "Your orientation starts in 15 minutes. She left Maya alone in the small, sterile room. Maya stood there for a moment, staring at the uniform. It looked so foreign, so not hers. Slowly, she stripped out of her worn jeans and faded t-shirt, folding them neatly and placing them on the chair. She pulled on the crisp white shirt, the stiff blazer. The skirt felt strange against her legs, the pleats swinging stiffly as she moved. She caught her reflection in the window, half ghost, half stranger. Taking a deep breath, she tied the school-issued tie around her neck with fumbling fingers. The knot came out crooked, but she left it. She was here. That was enough for now. Gathering her backpack, she stepped out into the hallway and walked into her new life. The orientation session was a blur of speeches, paperwork, handshakes. Maya sat stiffly in the auditorium, wedged between rows of students who smelled like money and looked like the future she had never thought she could touch. She nodded when prompted, mild when expected. Ju took the thick packet of information they handed her without a word. At lunch, she found a quiet corner of the courtyard, away from the clusters of laughing students. She unwrapped the peanut butter sandwich her mother had packed for her and ate slowly, her stomach twisting. She was halfway through when a shadow fell across her table. Maya looked up. A tall boy with tousled blonde hair and a mischievous grin was standing there, a tray of food balanced in one hand. "You're the new girl, right?" he said. Maya hesitated, then nodded. He plopped down across from her without waiting for an invitation. "I'm Connor," he said. "Connor Whitmore." "Maya," she said softly. Connor bit into his sandwich, chewed thoughtfully. "You look scared," he said bluntly. Maya blinked, thrown by his candor. "Lame, I am," she admitted, surprising herself. Connor grinned wider. "Good," he said. "Means you're paying attention." He offered her half his cookie. For the first time that day, Maya smiled. Maybe, just maybe, she could survive this place. Maybe she could even thrive. As she bit into the cookie, sweet and unexpected, she felt it again. That tiny ember of hope, glowing stubbornly against the odds. It wasn't much, but it was enough to start with. Maya Thompson sat alone at the far end of the library, her new textbooks spread open in front of her, though her eyes weren't reading. Her fingers absently traced the worn edge of a history book, the pages crisp and untouched by time or struggle, so unlike the second-hand copies she had borrowed her whole life. The hush of the library was heavy, punctuated only by the occasional squeak of a chair, the low murmur of students studying in clusters. Maya was not part of any cluster. She was an island. Her uniform, though matching in fabric, still clung differently to her frame, a little too stiff, a little too unsure. Her backpack, frayed and sagging, was a silent announcement that no matter how well she dressed the part, she didn't truly belong. Yet she was here. That counted for something. She turned a page, the paper whispering against her skin. "Hey," a voice said, startling her. Maya jerked her head up to see Connor Whitmore dropping into the seat across from her, his tie loosened, his hair a glorious mess as usual. "You looked like you were about to drown in that book," he teased. Maya offered a shy smile. "I'm trying," she said. Connor grinned, kicked out his long legs under the table. "You don't have to try so hard, you know," he said, tossing a pencil into the air and catching it effortlessly. "Half of these kids aren't half as smart as they pretend to be." Maya bit her lip. "It's not about them," she said quietly. "It's about me." Connor studied her for a moment, all teasing gone. "Yeah," he said finally, "I get that." He didn't press her. Didn't ask the questions she wasn't ready to answer. Instead, he pulled a battered notebook from his bag and flipped it open. "Want to help me fail algebra together?" he said, waggling his eyebrows. Maya laughed. A real, full sound that surprised even herself. "Sure," she said, and for a little while, the walls she had built around herself cracked, just a little, letting in something she hadn't dared believe she could find here. Friendship. The days blurred together after that. Maya threw herself into her studies with a ferocity that surprised even her teachers. She stayed late at the library, asked questions no one else bothered to ask, filled her notebooks with cramped handwriting and highlighted passages. Lunch, Connor made sure she always had a seat. Sometimes others drifted over, curious, cautious. A girl named Olivia, with a quick laugh and an encyclopedic knowledge of indie music. A boy named Javier, who could solve a Rubik's Cube in under a minute and never bragged about it. They didn't ask where Maya came from. They didn't ask why her backpack looked older than she was. They just let her sit with them. And that, more than anything, made Maya's heart ache, in the best and worst ways. Because for the first time, she wasn't invisible. She was seen. But not everyone was so welcoming. One crisp Friday afternoon, as Maya walked through the courtyard, a group of girls she had seen whispering in corners before stepped directly into her path. Their leader, a tall girl with perfect hair and a diamond-studded phone case, smirked. "Lost? Scholarship girl?" she drawled, the words sweetened with venom. Maya froze, heart hammering. Behind her, she could feel the weight of curious stares, the buzz of conversation dying into an expectant silence. She squared her shoulders. "No," Maya said, voice steady despite the tremble she felt deep inside. "Just on my way to class." She moved to step around them. The tall girl sidestepped, blocking her again. "I think you're special or something?" she said, eyes glittering. "Just because Mr. Renshaw pities you?" Maya's stomach twisted. The words hit their mark, sharp and precise. But she didn't flinch. Not this time. "I don't need pity," Maya said, her voice clear, carrying across the courtyard. "I earned my place here, just like anyone else." For a moment there was silence. Then a slow, mocking clap from the tall girl. "How inspiring," she sneered. "Maybe you should give a speech." Laughter rippled through her little entourage. Maya didn't wait to hear more. She lifted her chin, stepped around them, and kept walking. Each step felt like dragging a mountain behind her. But she didn't stop. She didn't look back. She didn't let them see her cry. It wasn't until she rounded the corner, hidden from sight, that she pressed her back against the cold brick wall and let herself breathe. Her hands trembled. Her throat burned. But she was still standing. And that, today, was enough. That night, Maya lay awake in her tiny bedroom, staring at the cracked ceiling. She replayed the scene over and over in her mind, the words, the sneers, the laughter. But louder than all of it was her own voice, ringing clear and proud. I earned my place. She clung to that. She had to. She thought of her mother, working double shifts at the diner, of Ethan Renshaw, offering a chance without asking for anything in return, of Sophia Renshaw, clutching Maya's hand on the sidewalk, whispering thank you with her last ounce of strength. They had seen her, believed in her. Now it was her turn to believe in herself. Maya rolled onto her side, pulled her threadbare blanket up to her chin. Tomorrow, she would get up. She would show up. She would try again, and again, and again, until the world had no choice but to make room for her. The days slipped into weeks, and Maya Thompson found herself settling into the strange rhythm of Riverside Academy. Each morning, she stood at the cracked bus stop in Hollow Creek, the stale wind tugging at her blazer, her backpack weighed down by books and a quiet, persistent determination. Every step onto campus felt like a rebellion, a small, silent act of defiance against everything and everyone that whispered she didn't belong. Inside those marble halls, she wore her invisibility like armor. She listened more than she spoke. She worked harder than anyone else. And every evening she returned home, her mother waiting at the table with tired eyes and a steaming bowl of canned soup, stretched with hope and weary prayers. One Friday, the sky cracked open with rain as Maya rushed from the bus to the school entrance. The courtyard glistened under sheets of water, the flagpole clanging in the wind like a lonely bell. She darted across the slick pavement, nearly slipping, her breath catching in her throat. From the corner of her eye, she saw a figure struggling with a fallen stack of books. Without thinking, Maya veered off course, skidding slightly as she knelt to help. It was Olivia, her arms full, papers scattering into puddles. "Thanks," Olivia gasped, her hair plastered to her forehead. Maya scooped up a soaked math notebook, offering a crooked smile. "Rain's a jerk," she said simply. Olivia laughed, breathless. Together they gathered the mess, their fingers brushing occasionally, grounding Maya in something real and human. When they stood, soaked and shivering, Olivia flashed her a grateful grin. "You're pretty awesome, you know that?" she said. Maya shrugged, her cheeks warming despite the cold rain. "I just couldn't leave you there." A flash of something, understanding maybe, crossed Olivia's face. They trudged inside together, dripping across the gleaming floor. And for the first time in days, Maya didn't feel so much like an outsider. But Riverside wasn't done testing her. Midterms approached, looming like dark clouds on the horizon. The pressure was relentless, silent, but crushing. One afternoon, after her last class, Maya found herself cornered again by the same group of girls who had mocked her weeks before. Their leader, Charlotte, leaned against a row of lockers, her arms folded, an eyebrow arched in practiced disdain. "Heard you're killing yourself trying to pass physics," Charlotte drawled, twirling a diamond-studded pin between her fingers. Maya didn't respond. She just kept walking. Charlotte's voice chased after her. "Just remember, no matter how hard you try," she called sweetly, "some of us are born here, and some of us are just visiting." Laughter erupted behind her, but Maya didn't look back. She tightened her grip on her books, her knuckles whitening. The words sliced deep, finding the soft, unprotected parts inside her. But she kept walking, step after step after step, because giving up wasn't an option. Not now, unless ever. The night before her physics exam, Maya sat at the kitchen table, her books spread out around her like a fortress. Her mother moved quietly in the background, the scent of burnt coffee lingering in the cramped apartment. Every so often, Carola would glance over, worry etched deep into her face. "You should sleep, baby," she said softly. Maya shook her head. "I can't," she whispered. "Not yet." She rubbed her burning eyes, willing the formulas to stick. "You're doing your best," Carla said, placing a warm hand on Maya's tense shoulder. "And your best is enough?" Maya swallowed hard. She wanted to believe that. But the fear gnawed at her. The fear of failing. The fear of proving every cruel whisper right. The fear of losing everything she had clawed so hard to reach. She looked up at her mother, her voice breaking. "What if my best isn't enough?" she choked. Carla crouched down, taking Maya's hands in hers, rough with years of work and sacrifice. "Then you keep going," she said fiercely. Calmed, one more step, always one more step. Tears blurred Maya's vision. She nodded, and somehow it was enough to keep her going. The next morning the world felt heavy. The sky was a dull, aching gray. Maya's stomach twisted as she walked into the exam room, the air thick with tension and sharpened pencils. She found her seat, placed her sharpened number 2 pencil on the desk, and waited. When the test landed in front of her, she froze. The first few questions swam before her eyes. Panic clawed at her throat. She squeezed her eyes shut, took a shuddering breath. One more step. She picked up her pencil and began. Hour after hour, she battled through every question. When she finally set her pencil down, her hand was cramped, her head pounding. Towards the 5th. That, she told herself, mattered. She staggered from the exam room into the chill of late afternoon. And there, leaning against the flagpole, like he had all the time in the world, was Connor. He pushed off and sauntered toward her, hands in his pockets. "How'd it go?" he asked. Maya exhaled a shaky laugh. "I survived." Connor grinned. "That's all anyone can ask." They walked toward the buses together, the world soft around the edges. Maya knew she hadn't been perfect, maybe not even good, but she had stayed. She had fought. They had taken one more step, and sometimes that was how change began, not with a roar, but with a whisper, a refusal to sit down, a refusal to be erased, a refusal to give up. As she climbed onto the bus, Maya turned her face to the window, watching the campus recede. Tomorrow would bring new battles. But tonight, she had won her own small, stubborn victory, and that she thought was enough. For now, winter had crept into Hollow Creek with a bitter patience, icing the cracked sidewalks and sagging rooftops with frost so thin it looked like the ghosts of forgotten dreams. Maya Thompson wrapped her thin jacket tighter around her as she waited at the bus stop, breath fogging in the early morning chill. Her fingers, still stiff from cramming through the night, tightened around the frayed straps of her backpack. She could feel it, the world tilting, shifting. Something inside her had changed. She wasn't just surviving anymore. She was beginning, just barely, to fight back. The bus pulled up, doors groaning as they folded open. Maya climbed aboard, the stale, familiar scent of exhaust and wet rubber wrapping around her like a heavy coat. She found her usual seat by the window, pressed her forehead to the glass, and watched the blurred city slip by. Today was the day they would post midterm results. Her stomach twisted. The bus lurched, brakes hissing at every intersection, until finally the towering gates of Riverside Academy came into view, proud and cold against the bruised morning sky. Maya stepped off, boots crunching against the salted walkway, and moved toward the main building with the rest of the students, a current she barely belonged to. Inside, the tension buzzed under the fluorescent lights. Everyone pretended not to care, laughing too loudly, checking their phones with exaggerated indifference. But Maya saw the way fingers drummed nervously against lockers, the way eyes darted toward the announcement board. It mattered. It mattered to all of them, especially to her. She made her way to the hall where the results would be posted. Already, a crowd had gathered, pressing shoulder to shoulder, murmuring like a restless sea. Maya hesitated at the edge, heart hammering, palms slick. Just go, she told herself. One more step. She'd squeezed through the throng, dodging sharp elbows and whispered gossip. Names blurred before her eyes, lines of letters and numbers swimming in and out of focus. She found the physics list first. Her finger trembled as she traced down, line by line. And then, Maya Thompson, 92%. For a moment she couldn't breathe. She blinked once, twice, to make sure it was real, not barely passing, not scraping by. A solid, undeniable victory. A sob built in her chest, but she swallowed it down. Around her, students compared grades, laughing, groaning, high-fiving. No one noticed the girl standing there, eyes burning, fists clenching the straps of her backpack like she was holding on to life itself. No one except one. Honor, thank you for the invite. He sidled up beside her, reading over her shoulder. A low whistle escaped him. Well, damn, Maya, he said, wide-eyed. You didn't just pass. You wrecked it. She let out a shaky laugh, the sound strange and broken in her own ears. Honor bumped his shoulder against hers. Proud of you, he said, voice softer, realer. Maya turned to him, emotion thick in her throat. I was so scared, she whispered. Connor smiled, crooked and kind. Fear just means you care, he said. Means you're still in the fight. Maya nodded, blinking hard. And for the first time, she let herself believe it. She wasn't an outsider. She wasn't a mistake. She was here, and she had earned every inch of it. The rest of the day floated by like a dream. Teachers handed back graded papers. Peers who had barely noticed her existence gave her nods, murmured congratulations. Even Charlotte, perfect, untouchable Charlotte, cast her a glance that wasn't quite disdain, almost reluctant respect. It was a small crack, a hairline fracture in the wall that had kept Maya locked out. She would find a way to widen it, brick by brick. That evening, as Maya trudged up the rickety stairs to her apartment, her mother threw open the door before she could even knock. Carla's face was bright with hope, her hands twisting anxiously in her apron. How did it go? She asked breathlessly. Maya dropped her bag with a thud, took a shuddering breath, and grinned so wide her cheeks hurt. I got a 92, Mom, she said, voice cracking. For a moment, Carla just stared. Then she burst into tears, pulling Maya into a crushing hug. You did it, she sobbed. You did it, baby. Maya clung to her, feeling the tremors rack her mother's tired frame. I had to, Maya whispered fiercely into her mother's shoulder. For us. They stood there for a long time, two figures wrapped in the dim hallway light, surrounded by peeling paint and threadbare hope. And in that moment, Maya wasn't just surviving. She was building one small victory at a time, one breath at a time, one unbreakable promise at a time, that no matter how high the walls, how heavy the weight, she would find a way. She would burn her own path through the darkness, because the fire inside her, the fire born from every slight, every setback, every whispered insult, would not be extinguished. Not now. Not ever. The cold air of February carried a sharpness that sliced through Maya Thompson's thin jacket as she stepped off the bus, her breath puffing in hurried clouds. The world around her gleamed with a brittle kind of beauty, sunlight scattering off patches of ice, windows trembling under the push of the wind. But inside Maya, something new burned, stronger than the cold, stronger than the doubt, It had taken root after the midterms, after the long nights and the whispered insults and the terrifying exams. It had grown, small but fierce in the cracks. They all said she'd never survive. Courage, but it was still fragile, still finding its legs, but it was hers. And today, it would be tested again. Maida's fingers tightened around the frayed strap of her backpack as she walked toward the main hall, heart pounding harder with each step. Because today she would have to speak, not just for herself but for others like her. Today was the Student Forum, a tradition at Riverside Academy where students could present proposals, ideas, changes they wanted to see. Most used it to suggest trivial things, better vending machines, longer lunch periods. But Maya had something else in mind. She had spent nights drafting her speech and the margins of her homework, refining it, sanding down the edges, finding words that might be sharp enough to pierce through the heavy walls of indifference. A proposal for a mentorship program, pairing new scholarship students with seniors willing to guide them. A way to make sure no one felt as lost and invisible as she had. She reached the grand entrance, the heavy oak doors looming like gatekeepers. For a moment fear clenched its icy hands around her throat. She could turn around. No one expected her to speak, anyway. But then, a memory flashed. Her mother's hands, rough and steady, squeezing hers. One more step. Maya exhaled, pushed the door open, and walked in. The auditorium buzzed with restless energy. Students shuffled into their seats, voices rising and falling like the tide. On stage, a polished podium stood under harsh fluorescent lights, the school crest glinting coldly on its front. Maya found her name on the list, number 6. She slid into a seat near the side aisle, her palms slick, her heart hammering loud enough to drown out everything else. Connor caught her eye across the room, flashing her a thumbs up. Maya tried to smile back, tried to believe she could do this. The first few speakers took the stage, easy, joking, the audience laughing along. Maya barely heard them. Her hands fumbled with the folded paper in her lap, creasing it beyond saving. When the moderator finally called her name, the sound sliced through her haze. Maya stood. Her knees wobbled. The room seemed to tilt. But she walked forward, each step a battle, each breath a prayer. She climbed the steps, took her place behind the podium. The microphone loomed, cold and expectant. 1,000 eyes stared back at her. For one terrible second, her mind went blank. The words, the ones she had poured her heart into, scattered like leaves in a storm. But then, another memory. Sophia Renshaw's trembling hand gripping hers on the sidewalk. "You're not alone." Maya found the paper crumpled in her fingers, found her voice hidden in the folds. She leaned toward the microphone and began. Her voice was shaky at first, barely above a whisper. She spoke of the first day she walked through the gleaming halls, feeling smaller than a shadow. Of the fear, of the loneliness, of the weight of being the outsider. The room shifted. The laughter faded. Silence wrapped around her, heavy and listening. Maya lifted her chin. "I'm not here asking for charity," she said, her voice growing stronger with every word. "I'm even here asking for a bridge, for a hand, for a way to say, you're not alone." She outlined the mentorship idea, simple, tangible, human. She didn't beg. She didn't apologize. She just asked them to see, to remember that kindness costs nothing, that sometimes survival wasn't about strength, but about being given a place to stand. When she finished, the silence hung heavy. Maya stepped back, her chest heaving, and for a moment she thought that was it, until someone began to clap. Soft at first, then louder and louder, until the whole room filled with it, applause crashing over her like a wave. Maya blinked, stunned. Connor was on his feet, clapping with a grin so wide it could have split his face in two. Others followed, even some she hadn't dared hope for. Even Charlotte, arms crossed, gave a single, sharp nod. It wasn't unanimous, it wasn't perfect, but it was real, and it was hers. Afterward, as students filed out, some stopped to squeeze Maya's shoulder, to murmur thanks. A teacher pressed a card into her hand, offering help to formalize the program. Maya floated through it all, dazed and glowing. She stepped outside, into the brittle cold. The sun was setting, bleeding gold across the frozen sky. Maya stood there for a moment, letting the air burn in her lungs. She pulled out her phone, her fingers still trembling, and texted her mother. "Maya, I did it, Mom, I really did it." The reply came almost instantly. "Carla, you were born too, baby. Never forget that." Maya tucked the phone away, lifting her face to the biting wind. Tomorrow, the fight would continue. There would be setbacks, doubt, hard days. But tonight, she had carved her voice into the stone of a place that tried to erase her. And no one, no sneer, no silence, no doubt, could ever take that away. Maya turned, stepping off the front steps, her shadow long and sure behind her. Each breath was a promise, each step a victory. And deep inside her, the fire blazed higher than ever. Maya Thompson stood alone at the edge of Hollow Creek, where the battered streets met the endless gray sky. She wasn't holding a trophy, nor did a crowd cheer for her. There were no headlines, no parades. Only the steady, unwavering beat of her own heart and the quiet, mighty knowledge that she had changed something. First in herself, then in others. Her victory was not the kind shouted from rooftops. It was stitched silently into the fabric of her days. Each morning she stood tall, each step she claimed as her own, each voice she helped lift alongside hers. The work was far from over. Beyond the applause in the auditorium, injustice still lingered, heavy and insidious. Maya knew that real change didn't happen in one grand moment. It was built, slowly and stubbornly, by ordinary people who refused to be silent. Through every cracked sidewalk and every unopened door, she would keep walking, carving a place, not only for herself, but for every quiet voice that deserved to be heard. Because the echoes of racism, once unleashed, could only be silenced by generations brave enough to keep answering back. There will be times when our victories are invisible to the world, when no one applauds, no one notices, no one even knows the mountains we have moved just to stand where we are. But know this: every small act of courage matters. Every silent endurance is a seed planted in the soil of justice. Change does not always come with trumpets or bright lights. Often it arrives in quiet persistence, in the girl who speaks when it would be easier to stay silent, in the mother who holds on a little longer for her child's sake, in the hand extended across a divide no one else dares to cross. We build a better world not in the grand gestures alone, but in the 1,000 small, stubborn, shining steps we take when no one is watching. If this story touched you, we invite you to be part of the change. Please subscribe to Unheard Racist Stories, share this story with someone who needs to hear it, and help us keep these powerful voices alive. Every story shared is a step closer to a world where dignity, justice, and humanity are for everyone. Thank you for walking this path with us. Stay with Unheard Racist Stories, where every unheard voice finally finds its place.